Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, his office handles misdemeanors to civil trials to offering advice and opinions, as well as representing the city in both Sacramento, in front of the legislation, and in front of Congress. Of course, I am talking about the LA City Attorney's Office, and I'm delighted to be joined by the LA City Attorney, Michael Feuer. Nice to have you.
Oh, Maria, it's really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so I kind of gave a general list of what the office is responsible for and those that are part of your team. But this is a really different environment, and there are a lot of things that your office is dealing with now that may not have even been on your radar for a while.
At the moment, of course, in Los Angeles, we're seeing the convergence of several crises that are testing all of us. We see the health effects of the emergency posed by the pandemic. We're seeing the cratering of the economy caused by the pandemic. We're seeing urgent calls for racial justice and equity in every institution and how we grapple with violence, including the risk between police and people on the street. And that's on top of homelessness, which just a few months ago was the major issue for people in our region, climate change, the major issue for our world, and other things, all happening at the same time. And so the challenge for those of us in positions of leadership is how we imagine the next days to come, how we make Los Angeles the best version of who our city can be.
But amidst all of this, you and all of us have been dealing with a global pandemic and arenas in which we have no choice, and arenas that have caused your office to have to make some decisions. And I know that one of the things that was very important to you and your office is protecting those who are safer at home, but maybe not safer at home.
So you're talking about our Behind Closed Doors campaign.
Exactly.
And let me elaborate on how this came to be. So we're 3 months or so into the pandemic now. And earlier on, maybe a couple months ago, month and a half ago, we noticed that reports for certain crimes at home, domestic violence and child abuse in particular, were down. In mid-April, for domestic violence, down by about 13%. Reports of child abuse down by nearly 50% here in Los Angeles. I'm very skeptical that those diminished reports reflect a diminution in acts of violence to a domestic partner, a spouse, or kids. So if we're not seeing a meaningful decline in those events, those crimes, what's going on? And we feel as though, although there's no data to support this for sure, that it's because people are reluctant to report, feel they can't report, are concerned about the consequences. So we need to change that. We established Behind Closed Doors with the district attorney, the Grocers Association, and the school district. A kind of unusual combination. I asked, why is that coalition put together? And for this reason. We said we want to try to alert people to the importance of reporting, to the fact that there are resources to help you, that you are not alone. We decided that for someone who's trapped with an abuser in their house, the one place they might be allowed to go to get out is to get food. At one of two places, either a grocery store or an LAUSD food distribution site. So we partnered with those two groups and arranged for resources, information to be at those locations, so that if I'm someone being victimized by domestic abuse, I would learn, for instance, I don't need to make a phone call to 911 if that's too conspicuous. I can text 911 and police will come to my door. I'm worried the pandemic has reduced shelter options. No, there actually are shelter options available to me. I have a place to which I can go. The courts are closed. Well, no, actually for emergency protective orders, you can get an emergency. Though that's a kind of information that we thought would lead people to say it is not fruitless for me to report if I'm being abused. There is absolutely no way for me to establish cause and effect, but I will say in the week after we highly publicized this program, reports of domestic abuse went up. Now that doesn't mean, you might say, why is that a good thing? If you suspect that the reason that the reports were down was only because people were uptight about making the reports, an increase in them suggests something closer to people are now knowing they can assert their rights. So, I think this, and by the way, the campaign's also around, as you said, friends and neighbors, others in the community, looking in, what's going on here? If they hear a noise, if they hear some major a violent event occurring next door, to report that as well. As I said earlier, in a different context, if you are merely a spectator to something that is terrible that is happening nearby, you're complicit in the continuing of that problem. And so we're trying to get people alerted to their roles. Maria, at the end of the day, right now, if I can cut through all this, we have obligations to each other as a society. If you're going to go out in public, have a mask on. Don't, if not for you, for the person you're coming in contact with. If you're a store desperate to reopen, I'm very empathetic with that. But if you're not essential, you got to recognize that you need to shut down temporarily because our society needs to get open faster. If you have a neighbor and you can hear screaming from next door and the slamming of doors or something worse than that, you cannot stand by quietly and watch that. This is a moment to recognize that we need each other. And if there's a deeper theme here, I don't know what it is.
And you're making sure guns are locked up at home, because that is something that I don't even know if it would even cross the mind, but now that you have children at home all the time, to make sure that they are protected, because how horrible that a child would be a victim of gun violence in their own home.
One of the aspects of gun violence that is most preventable is when kids get a hold of someone else's gun. And let's look at that for a second. There are many contexts in which that could happen. Surveys show that 2/3 of kids know where their parent's gun is located, and more than 80% of them have handled those guns at some point. And then, imagine a despondent teen getting a hold of that gun. Suicide is the major act of gun violence that our society has to contend with. Our office prosecutes adults when kids have taken unsecured guns from their parents' home or an adult's home to school, for instance. Only some coincidences and acts of courage and so forth have prevented major tragedies where our office has come in after the fact to say, adult, you haven't secured your gun, and there are consequences to that. I don't want to be punitive here. I want to be preventative. I want every adult to know if you've got a gun at home, lock it up. Keep it safe, because your kid's life could be at stake. We are prosecuting a case right now that emerged fairly recently where a 5-year-old kid got a hold of a gun that was unsecured, we allege, in the household. And I will say that, unfortunately, tragedy occurred. We can do better if only adults would take one simple step. Secure guns in your home. We're not saying you can't have a gun at home for defensive purposes. We're just saying if you have one at home, keep it locked up. And in this pandemic, of course, the need to do so is accentuated times 10, because we're home all the time. Kids are home close to those weapons all the time. So yeah, we are in a campaign to underscore the importance of safely storing guns. There's
Something that you're working on now, a report about mass shootings. So what is coming out in this report, and what have been the changes since this initiative was created 7 years ago?
That's a good memory, that's right. So soon after I became city attorney, I called the district attorney of Manhattan, whose name is Cyrus Vance Jr. I had met him once, and I proposed the following. As you mentioned, I'd been a legislator in Sacramento. And I learned very quickly, when you're a lawmaker in the Capitol, you get a piece of paper for every bill. The paper says what the bill says, what it would do in practice, who's for it, who's against it, and if you're a Democrat or Republican, your caucus recommends how you should vote on that matter. Interesting to me was, on the for and against it sides, who cared about whom. For example, Democrats cared about whether the Sierra Club was supportive or something, and Republicans might care about the Chamber of Commerce. Everybody cared about what prosecutors thought, Democrats and Republicans alike. So I became the city attorney. As we mentioned, one of my jobs is to be the city's top prosecutor. So I said to Mr. Vance, why don't we combine forces and create the nation's first ever coalition of prosecutors focused on gun violence prevention, because we have credibility everywhere. This is your opportunity to assure that some potential victim in your midst is saved from a tragedy.